Well, welcome back to the podcast Moves That Matter with myself, Mike Berry. I don't have Michael Looney here with me today, but I do have another Mike. He was a target of opportunity. I've got Mr. Mike Prats from, he's the Managing Director of Community Development Strategies, and he's going to join us today and talk about some of the work he's been doing here in San Angelo and talk about what we can do to plan for our potential growth before we hit this big boom that everybody's talking about. So Mike, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about what is CDS or Community Development Strategies and where you guys are based out of, and tell me a little bit about yourself and the company.
CDS is a small boutique consulting firm located in West Houston, and we've been around since 1971. It's myself and four other colleagues of mine. But we've been, pretty prolific in the housing study area. So we do a lot of work for economic development corporations, cities and counties in Texas. And we've recently been doing work also for mostly housing studies for EDCs in Louisiana, Oklahoma, and we've done one in Missouri.
Okay.
So that's a quick rundown of CDS.
Yeah. And that's what you did for San Angelo, right? The city has now employed you twice, one for a housing study that was finished about 2019.
Yes.
And then another one you just completed the second one to that, an update plus some other information.
Right.
About the overall housing situation in the market here in San Angelo, right?
Yes, we our housing studies, we look at population and demographic trends. We look at the county level economic data, employment, wages, job growth by sector, and then we look at the multifamily, the single family markets, and then we drill down to say, for a local economy, if we had a new prospect come in, if we had this existing business grow, and we had this many more jobs and they made, this, range of wages, what is the demand for housing and what is that demand going to do, to the existing housing supply, and what is it going to mean for additional housing, and how do we align that with our local economy and our jobs, because that's the number one demand of housing in any community is going to be your local workforce.
Yeah. And that's kind of why we have you here today. We took this opportunity because, we're talking all things economic development, but at the same time, Michael Looney and I can't do our jobs and grow the business community and grow the local economy unless we have available housing for the folks that are going to work at these places. And not just housing, but affordable housing, right? I think in our economic reviews that we do every quarter, I dedicate 4 separate charts just to the housing market itself because it's so dynamic. And I think one of the things that we've noticed here is, one, supply is tight, and it's tightening. And we tend to have this overvaluation issue where about 30% of the homes are somewhat overvalued for a number of reasons. Right now, it's not necessarily because of the mortgage rates or the financing costs. It's really just we've got higher priced homes and less of what we would say is more affordable workforce housing. And I think that's kind of what we'll get into a little bit later, but that's kind of what your study also found, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One other thing, I don't want to forget it just because I'm thinking about it, talking about housing and economic development. Of course, we talk about, housing for workforce at all, levels, from entry level to manager or CEO. But I think one thing that we also need to remember when we're talking about housing and economic development is the economic generation of home building and home construction that it creates for your local economy.
It's a business in and of itself.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you have obviously new housing growth, it's not just to satisfy, demand for housing from workers. It's also a driver of your local economy because you're circulating money. And especially in San Angelo, I want to give a big shout out to, the local builders in San Angelo. San Angelo is a very unique market because y'all don't have really any publicly traded, Wall Street home builders here. It's all local, and that's guys. Super unique. that's super, and it's special because, again, all that money is staying here, right? Those guys live here, they work here, they shop here, and
They build here.
they build here, they buy land here, they're investing their money here, they pay taxes here. So, I'm not going to say the name of any of these companies, but you don't have any of these companies here that are just coming here, pumping out homes, and all the money is just being sucked out to, investors.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good point. And I think with our local builders, and I think from the first study to now, we saw some movement in increasing supply. Maybe not enough, and there's a number of reasons we'll get into why that could have been. But I think one of the biggest issues I think that our local builders have is they're spending a lot of time and money focusing on infrastructure and not just building the homes. So I think one of the biggest gaps we have is we've got room for residential infrastructure development firms to come in and help us get over this hump so the builders can just do what the builders do, which is build homes.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, that's why you see in especially bigger markets where smaller builders have a hard time competing with, larger volume builders, they put in most of the infrastructure because they are a publicly traded company and they have their own financing, they do their own in-house mortgages. That's why when you buy a new home, it's got a lower mortgage rate than what anybody else is because the builders can buy down the rates because they do the financing in-house, and they can also finance millions and tens of millions of dollars of, infrastructure.
Right. And doing it at scale keeps the cost down.
Right. They can spread it over hundreds or thousands of lots, and the home is still, affordably priced in many places. I will say that a lot of that, especially outside of Houston, is done through MUDs. Okay. Municipal utility districts, where the developer spends $10 or more million up front to put in the streets and the utilities and sewer and water. But the municipal utility district allows them to then go and sell municipal utility bonds on the bond market, and they can sell them and get reimbursed. TCEQ approves what expenditures the developer put in for infrastructure and utilities, and TCEQ says this is how much you can get reimbursed through those bond sale proceeds. And I don't see why a city couldn't do that either. I don't see why a city couldn't build the infrastructure or partner with a developer
to do that
and develop the land and develop the infrastructure, and maybe even just partner on the cost share of it, where maybe the city pays 20 or 30%, or the EDC and city can share and help if it's going to be for affordable housing. And I don't see why you can't go issue municipal utility bonds and get those proceeds to, help pay for that.
Sure.
And then of course you're going to have people paying property tax and service tax for the utilities that you create. So that's what you're going to use to maintain and operate that. So,
yeah. And you've got a lot of those types of suggestions in the actual study.
Not so much on that infrastructure piece, because this was obviously more just a housing assessment and recommendations for that. But yes, we recommend in this study that, and this is a study funded by the EDC. And so it's really an economic development focused study. So we're looking at what can the EDC do. And legally, the EDC can only make expenditures on housing that are for affordable housing.
Right.
And so again, that's why we look at, what's affordable that the EDC can help, and not in the the PowerPoint that I did today for the Development Corporation, but in the report, I've got a whole table of EDC, incentives, a toolbox that the EDC can use to help,
spur the development
infrastructure costs.
Yeah.
Or even lot costs, land costs. I've got examples in there of other cities that we've done studies in that we've seen, like Kerrville, and Sweetwater, Borger, and these are not all big cities,
right?
Certainly not any bigger than San Angelo, much smaller, and they're figuring out ways to do it, and they certainly have much smaller budgets, than San Angelo does, but they're figuring out how do you pay for this,
Sure.
so that all that lot cost, the land cost, the infrastructure cost isn't all being passed on to the home buyer. So if we can lower those costs with the infrastructure, if we can lower the time that it takes to approve and permit things, if we can even lower some of the the fees that impact fees, for instance, then we can, I think, lower the price of housing, the end price of it.
Good. So before we get into all of that in detail, talk to me about why doing studies like you guys do and having municipalities come in and ask for a study to be done. Why is collecting all that data and having a report so important as an initial step before they just a shotgun effect and try to solve an issue?
It helps local government to understand the housing market, and it gets that housing market data out of just the builders and the real estate agents. Not that they're just holding it, but no one's really willingly going and asking them, hey, what's going on in our market, right? And sometimes you do need someone to come in that can take kind of a higher view and isn't just focused on certain streets or certain neighborhoods, right? And that we're comprehensively looking at the whole city. And what we always say is these studies are taking a lot of what everyone knows, all the economic development folks know, the planning commission board knows, the real estate brokers all know. This is all information that we all know and talk about in a community.
Third party, unbiased, putting it in black and white.
Yeah, and it's not documented on the paper with data for everyone to share. So that's a big purpose of it, but it also can be used by developers, as a market study, to raise money or to finance, potential projects so that we know, what is the demand and what's the existing supply and what does the, job market look like. So I think it helps the development and the real estate community. It helps local government, helps economic development, helps local employers, because we also do workforce housing study, where we send a survey out to, local employers. And see what the employees are saying as far as housing goes. So those are all the reasons why I think it's important to do this. And, when we did this back in 2018 and finished it in 2019, San Angelo saw a surge of new multifamily development because developers from outside of San Angelo saw this study.
Justified the need, and they were able to get their project off the ground.
They didn't have to go do a market study, right? It was already done for them. Now I'm sure they maybe had to do some, double check and, hey, let's make sure all this data is correct. Let's see if there's really is this much demand. But once you've already got something to double check, once you got one bid, it makes the next bid.
Sure, sales pitch is done. It does all the work for you. Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point you made. Some of the multifamily properties that were developed. Part of that has to do with, and a lot of what the need that you talk about in here is related to our overall economic makeup. We've got the Goodfellow Air Force Base where we have permanent party, but we have a lot of transient trainees that come through here and are rotating out, and they're not necessarily looking to buy a place, and not all of them are necessarily able to live on base. So they're looking for a rental property short term, maybe 9 months to a year worth of a lease. But then we've also got Angelo State University, so you got a lot of student population that are looking for a rental property, whether it's an apartment or it's a rental house they can share with a couple folks. So I think to that point, that market is in dire need of more housing, and what we saw spur from the last study is a direct.
Well, look at just ASU. What are we talking about? 9,000 students?
Yeah, or more. Yeah,
and they've got 2,000 on-campus units. So that's 7,000 students that are competing for rental housing, and there's 11,000 rental units in San Angelo.
That alone right there just proves that
we haven't even talked about Air Force Base. We haven't talked about a prospect that might be coming in, that might be bringing in 500 or 100 employees, right?
And that's a good point, because Michael and I, when we're looking at helping businesses expand or bringing in a new business, we have to be very careful, because we're like, look, hey, we already have a very tight labor market, very low unemployment. Everybody who's working is pretty much working. So we struggle right now due to the housing availability issue of we really can't absorb more than about 100 new jobs a year just because we don't have any place to put these people, right? One, it's a balancing of we don't want to cannibalize existing businesses, but we also don't want to encourage some 500, 600,000 employee business to set up shop here because we don't have a place for them to live at the moment.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and again, that's why, we work very closely with the Economic Development Organization. The EDCs are the ones that contact us, reach out to us, and hire us. And so that's why we do this, because a lot of times it's confidential. There's information that you guys know about that you cannot even tell city council. You can't tell anyone about because you're dealing confidentially under an NDA with some,
Company.
huge company that might a national or even international company. And so sometimes you kind of got to hide the information in the report by saying, if this was to happen, this is how much more housing you would need.
Right.
Basically because this is very likely to happen.
Sure.
And so this is why this is important. This is why housing is important, because if we want the local economy to continue to grow and develop, then we and to bring those jobs in, the ones that want to come in, and let's be fair to the city, and let's be fair to builders and developers and everyone else. A company can come in overnight.
Sure.
Just like you're saying, a company can come in, whether it's 50 or 5,000, that happens overnight, but you can't build 50 or 5,000 housing units overnight.
Right. So you got to plan for that. And these types of studies are the step to, one, not just identify what the need is, but actually start the steps in lead turning so that you're ready for when those companies come in, when that demand hits overnight and you need a place for people to be. So let's take a step back a little bit. Talk to me about, with all the studies that you do, all the communities that you work with, what are you sensing can you talk to some of the pain points at a national level that you see with the housing market, regardless of where you are in the country? What are you guys sensing?
Zoning was kind of a reaction in the 70s. If you look at housing data, there was like a big housing boom, in the 70s. That was when a lot of housing in most cities was built, almost 50 or 60% of the homes in San Angelo were built before 1980.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these cities, especially smaller, mid-sized cities, said, this is too much growth. This is too much development.
Too much, too fast.
We need zoning.
Yeah.
Zoning is created to manage development. My background is in urban planning, urban and regional planning. So when I was in grad school in, 2008, 9, still during that time, it was growth management.
Okay.
We're going to teach you how to be a city planner, and no offense to city planning here in San Angelo, I think, are doing a phenomenal job with the small staff that they have. I think they're very competent. They have backgrounds, education in urban and regional planning. So this is no dig at them directly.
Sure.
or any planning staff. This is a honest reflection of someone that had a education in it. They were telling my class, look, you need to manage growth. You need to manage development. You're going to be a city planner. You're going to go work for these cities, and these developers are coming in and they're going to build whatever they want. They're going to make all this money, and you need to be able to, they didn't say block development, but
slow it.
You've got to be able to manage growth.
Yeah. Okay.
And so that is what zoning is in the vein of. It's blocking development.
Okay.
We've got too much growth. We've got too much real estate development. Let's put in all these rules to segregate all these uses, spread everything out, and slow everything down. And so what that's created is, if you want to build a house or an apartment in pretty much any city, big or small, you can either build a large lot, single family home that's going to end up being, between $300,000 and $500,000, or you're going to build a big apartment complex with 250 units. And that's it. That's it.
That pushes a lot of people out of the market.
Well, it's also not compatible with a lot of cities.
Yeah.
And this is why, again, people want to block new development, especially in a place like Kerrville. All older residents, we don't want all this new growth. We don't want all this new development.
Right.
Well, what if it could be layered in? What if instead of 250, apartment units in some big giant, space, $100 million, Why can't it be 200 ADUs in people's backyards in the neighborhood that's already existing? So how can we layer in and scale up our housing with what we have, with the roads that we have, with the lots that we've already got, with the infrastructure that's already in place? Because at the end of the day, the cost to service a city is how many linear feet of X do I have to maintain?
Got it. Yeah.
How many feet of concrete do I have to maintain? How many feet of pipes do I have to build and maintain, right?
Right.
Well, if we can put more housing and more real estate development, more productive land uses in what we've already got, then we don't have to go
maintain
spend
as much.
$100 million to put in new. Now, that's not to say we shouldn't have new infrastructure and new development, but it's just to say, why can't we open up single family zones in existing neighborhoods to have backyard cottages, or if the house is so old that it's fallen down and it's on a 50-foot lot, why can't I knock this house down and split the lot and build two 25-foot small homes with no garage, or a townhome or a duplex?
Yeah.
But the codes don't allow it.
Don't allow it. So talk to me about that, right? Because I grew up outside of Houston. You guys are there in Houston. We knew growing up there that it was somewhat of a free-for-all. There really was no zoning in that area. So talk to me about what that looks and feels like in Houston, and what's good and or bad about that concept.
So in 1998, the city of Houston said, we're going to get rid of our minimum lot size. They already didn't have zoning, but it was the minimum lot size, right?
Okay.
So they said, we're going to go to a minimum lot size of 1,800 square feet. Most cities, it's 5,000 or 7,500 square feet, which is a 50-foot lot or a 70-foot lot.
Okay.
That's the minimum lot size in most cities in Texas, okay? Houston in 98 said, we're going to go down to 1,800 square foot. That's the minimum lot size. So what that did is that did just what I said. It opened up all of these the heights.
Yeah.
What the heights is today is because of that minimum lot size change.
Okay.
And then, so I think that increased like housing by, I don't know, something like 300%, like housing construction because it opens up all these lots now to be built on. You know, I have family that live in the Heights that have lived there since the 90s. They still have an original house. The two houses next door to them are now 4 houses.
Yep.
Because the 2 big ones were so old, they got knocked down. But so that's adding more housing. You're increasing your housing supply because now you've got 4 houses where you used to have 2.
Without having to acquire more land.
But your codes have to allow that
to happen. Yeah.
And again, why wouldn't you want that? Do you want that, or do you want a new 250 unit apartment?
Yeah.
Right?
No, agreed.
And again, that's on an existing lot with an existing street that already has a ditch, that already has drainage, that already has electricity, that already has water and sewer, right? All you're doing is just adding a tap.
Yeah.
But the codes have to allow it. And cities like Lubbock, Austin, Houston, they just in the last year or so, they've pretty much gotten their minimum lot size down very low. They've opened up single family zones to where in any single family zone, you can now do what we're talking about. You can now split a 50-foot lot and build 2 25-foot lots. You can.
So in those areas, are you guys seeing that the home building is actually ticking up because of that?
Oh yeah. Look at Lubbock, man.
Okay.
Look at West Lubbock. West Lubbock is friggin' booming. And their cheapest homes are $165,000.
Wow.
And it's a 900 or 1,000 square foot, 2-bedroom, 1-bath home.
Yeah, but
a local worker can afford that. Especially, 2 retail workers,
sure,
a couple, married or boyfriend, girlfriend, or even coworkers, they could afford that,
And that's going to be a lot more appealing than going and renting an apartment in a multifamily for a lot of folks. I mean, it's the
brand
same
new.
size and it's new, but it's
brand new.
Basically,
go look on Zillow.
Home.
Go look on Zillow right now and go to Lubbock. Go to West Lubbock. I think it's Upland and I want to say 40th or 140th. I can't remember. It's the road going west out towards Levelland. I did a housing study for Levelland, and this is what I found. it's hard to build anything in Levelland because who can build anything cheaper than that?
Right. Yeah, it's hard to afford.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so let's shift again gears a little bit. Let's talk more specifically about what you found, some of the details you found and presented this morning with regards to the study for San Angelo itself. And like I said earlier, right, one of the things you mentioned in there is, yes, we have a tightening supply. And the houses that are moving tend to be on the higher end of the average or median price. And like you said earlier, we've got an aging stock. So the majority of our homes, well over half of our homes, were built pre-1980. A lot of them haven't even been updated, let alone on the outside, in the inside either.
Yeah.
I know that was a thing for us when we moved back out here in 2012. We were looking at housing inventory in 2012, and there were homes that we were looking at hadn't been touched on the inside since the 70s. And in 2012, we decided, you know what, we can build something new cheaper than what we can go buy that hadn't been touched in 30, 40 years. That's not the case anymore today.
Yeah.
Thankfully, we got it done when we got it done.
Right.
But so yeah, aging stock is an issue. And so therefore there's a replacement need, not just in rehabbing some of the existing ones that have good bones, but we got to replace some of that old stock with, there's actually a need for new builds, and not just multifamily rentals, but homes to buy or even single family, multifamily homes to rent. Either way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Like we said, look, you've got 11,000 rental units and you've got 7,000 students looking for a place to live. Then you've got the base. They've only got 250 on base units. And then everyone else's, they're competing for rental space. You've got Shannon, they're hiring, and they're going to add a couple of thousand workers in the next few years.
One of our biggest employers.
And so then now you start adding it up, right? And a lot of these folks are renters. They don't make enough money to qualify for a mortgage, again, unless it's a dual income household,
right? And
they've got good credit.
But some people just don't, though. They would just rather rent anyway.
Some people would rather rent. You know, of all wage scales, there's I guarantee you there's somebody right now who's an empty nester in San Angelo who's 50, 60, 70 years old in a house that they could sell for $400,000 to $700,000. But they're not going to do it because there's nowhere for them to down. There's no luxury rentals. They don't want to live in an apartment complex with students and Air Force people.
There's not an equivalent
No
option
offense to them, but when you get to that age and you want to downgrade, you want something nice and
relatively new and low maintenance costs.
In all price ranges, I think there's demand for rental, but especially for lower income. I mean, the demand for housing in San Angelo, in every city, all across America, is workforce housing.
So let's talk about that, right? So you have target prices mentioned in your report. So for homes and rentals, what did you find is that sweet spot for a target price for home buying and also for rental properties?
So for the median household income in the court, again, this is a household of 60,000, which. So they can afford a $185,000 home. And, we look at for rental, most renters, folks that make $35,000, $40,000, they're going to need a unit between $1,000 and $900 a month. And again, it's hard to build anything. You can't build anything new for those prices. It has to be, to get those prices, there has to be some sort of help, either, again, like I said, land cost, infrastructure cost, utility cost. There has to be something there.
Some changing in the codes that allow you
some sort of incentive. Or, and I don't know, changing the code is not going to, I don't know that it's going to, we'd have to talk to the builders.
Changing the code alone may not get us there.
I don't believe so. It's not just, it's everything. It's changing, it's opening up the zoning, which they're working on here.
Yeah.
That's going to happen, I believe, and a lot of this information is going to go into that. But I believe that builders do want to build townhomes and garden homes and patio homes.
Yeah.
In every city that I work in, the real estate agents all say the homes that sell the quickest are the garden homes and patio homes. Those have the lowest days on market.
Good. And that makes sense, right? There's less maintenance, right?
But again, these aren't 50-foot lots, and they've got different setbacks. And so we don't want to have to go through like a special process.
Just to put something like that up.
Right.
Almost it needs to be pre-approved.
Right.
Go in, do it.
Right.
Get it done. Move people in.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
We should. San Angelo has duplexes. They have fourplexes. They've got small workforce single family homes with no garages, no fence, all this cheap affordable housing, but you can't build new of it today without going through a special process.
Got it. Okay.
And that's what we want to get away from in all cities, is get away from this sort of zoning and regulation for this sort of housing, for this missing middle, housing. Where do we have it here? These are not 50-foot lot single family homes, and they're not big giant 250 unit apartments. But this is what we're talking about, to increase the scale of housing by layering this stuff into what we already have and building more new of it. Because you do have, row homes here, you do have townhomes here, but
it's sporadic.
Because you've got to squeeze it into this one little single area that's zoned for
that.
Or you've got to get special permission through a process that takes a lot of time. And again, the time is money in real estate when you're developing real estate, right? So we want to make the process as quickly and
affordable as possible.
Right.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the demand analysis that you found, right? So what did you find that we need now because of the last 5 years worth of growth since we kind of did this previous study? So what are you saying that we need now in terms of inventory, in addition to what are we going to need in the next 5 years?
Well, again, looking at the employment, the three of the top, 4 employment sectors, and we're talking, 15,000 workers, are making between $40,000 and $34,000. And so again, the affordable housing, especially rental, there's need for anywhere from, I think, 800 or more, affordable. And these would be like tax credit, low income housing tax credit, units. But looking at the job growth, so
I think it's important to start here is that job growth is expected. You are expected to see modest growth.
Yeah.
And even in population, there's an expected to be a modest population growth. So that's a good sign. That's a good problem to have.
Right.
Right. It's not too much too fast. But what does that mean in terms of units that we need to see based off of those projections? What do we need now and what do we need in the future?
1,800 units is what I've got for pent-up demand. So that's from job growth that we've had over the last 3 years.
So we're short 1,800 homes.
That's what it looks like to me. And again, this is just looking at from a job growth perspective.
Yeah.
We're not talking about retarees that are moving here because they want to live close to their kids. Or we're not talking about, investors that can come in and buy homes and, so
strictly based off job growth.
This is just, so I would say this is probably a conservative,
okay.
A conservative number for pent-up demand.
Got it. All right, so 1,800. So let's look at out to 2030 or beyond. Where are we sitting?
Anywhere from, I'd say, 1,200 to 2,500 units.
Really? That seems like a massive hurdle to get over.
I mean, it's really not like,
Why? Why is it not?
I mean, there's developments in Houston that are building, 200 and 300 homes a year.
Oh,
And that's just like one development.
That's a relatively small development for there. Yeah.
So that's one master plan community, so a couple thousand homes.
It's doable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we're not talking, again, just single family homes. If we can, again, that missing middle picture, it's those types of housing, those housing types.
That entry level, the first time buyers, the
people can move down, down, who knows? You want to have enough housing supply at all price ranges so that people can filter. You want your housing to filter. You want to have enough supply so that people can move here, get their first job out of college, get married, have kids, go from that place they're renting to buying. And then years down the line, sell that and upgrade and move up. And then sell that house and then move down and get, something that's easier to
So
maintain.
you're saying we've got this gap in that middle section. It's not allowing them to go from this kind of entry level into this mid range that doesn't exist. So this mid range is what's missing.
We need the missing middle. We need that missing middle so that folks can be filtering at all different stages of their career, of their of their life.
And from a home buying standpoint, that's under 200,000. It's kind of what your target area is.
If you ask builders, you say, where's most of the demand? They say, if I could build a house for 175, I could sell 1 million of them.
Yeah.
If I could sell a house at 185, 200, I'd sell
just as many.
I'd sell 2,000 of them.
Yeah.
But they can't get the cost down. Again, if the 50-foot lot is the smallest lot they can build a new home on,
It's never going to happen.
the price is not going to get below 250 or 300.
Okay.
And again, if there's no help, with incentives or reimbursement on the infrastructure, on the utilities,
Right.
Doing
it the way we're doing it now isn't going to get us there.
You can, but you're gonna continue. You're not gonna get. Again, no one can build a home here. All the builders will say we can't build a home and sell it for under 250,000. I mean, they can. They're doing infill stuff. That's another thing I want to say. Y'all have an incredible infill program.
Okay.
Y'all,
Talk to us.
Your infill, the infill is great. I mean, that's all the Lakeview area. When you drive north up Chadbourne and you go all the number streets and you go off there, all those newer homes. I mean, that's what we need more of. That's what we want more of. And you've got local builders that want to,
Do it.
build that stuff. Yeah. So I think continue that infill program and see how can we go. Let's talk to the builders and see what are they saying. What can we do to help them get more of this type of housing.
Got it. Okay. So let's move into some of the key conclusions and the recommendations you make in the report. I won't have to go over all of them, but I want to focus on some of the key ones that you think are there. So just off the top of your head, what are some of the main conclusions you pull out of this that I think people need to walk away with understanding, whether they're the general residents or they're city officials or they're the builders here in the community?
I think I have to go back to the renters, the cost burden renters. 47%, almost 50% of the renters in San Angelo are paying 30% or more of their income on housing.
What's a good target? What percent of their income should they be spending towards?
No more than 30%.
No more than 30.
30% is about it.
About it. Okay.
And now we're not talking about student loan debt. We're not talking about if somebody gets sick, if somebody loses your job, if you get injured and you can't work. So these things happen. If a flood comes,
Yep.
So that's just in normal circumstance. And then you add other things in and it's, renting is difficult. And so having a rental supply, a stock of affordable rental housing is going to help your local economy. It's going to help your quality of life. Not to get too into the weeds of affordable housing, but when you see homelessness increasing, that's typically a sign that your housing is unaffordable.
Gotcha. Okay. What about overall recommendations? What would be your top one or two recommendations about how we move forward and actually be able to not just put a study like this on the shelf, but start acting on it sooner rather than later?
I think y'all are already doing things.
Okay.
And again, shout out to St. Angelo, to the planning staff, to the EDC board and the EDC staff and the chamber staff. Y'all have got things going. Y'all are moving in the right direction, looking at the zoning changes to allow for all this stuff we're talking about, all these missing middle housing types. I think the EDC board is moving forward with figuring out how can we help with, land or infrastructure, utility costs. And so I think y'all are going in the right direction. And everything that I've said is the recommendations that are in the report,
Good.
plus a lot more.
Yeah. So one last remaining comment. What would, if there's one thing you want everybody to take away from, whether they dig into the details of the report or they dig into the presentation, or they go back and watch your presentation today at CoCDC, what do you think across the board is the one lasting comment you want to leave with everybody? I know I'll put you on the spot.
Obviously, I'm passionate about housing. I think it's important for the city to say, what can we do to make sure that we're meeting demand and that people have a place to live. Because housing is not just an investment; it's not just a way to grow your personal wealth. It's mental health too. It's people that own homes and live in neighborhoods with trees have a lower resting, blood pressure and heart rate. So housing, it helps your mental health, it helps your physical health, helps your local economy, right? So obviously I'm an advocate for housing. This is what I do, so I'm passionate about it. So that's, I guess, what I would leave you with, is I think housing is more than just a job to have or industry to work in or a study to do. It's a place for people to live. And
That's great. No, I appreciate that. So I think sum it all up by just saying, I think when we're talking about our strategic growth forward, growth starts with understanding, and you can't just guess at it, and which is why I think the city's done a great job going out, getting a study like this done, having guys like you be able to pare it down and explain it in a way that's easily digestible and gives us a nice roadmap for what we need to do next. Great job, and I really appreciate your partnership on this. We talked about this on our last podcast. Partnerships are the beginning of any business relationship, any business transaction. It comes down to the relationships and the partnership you have with those folks. So I think San Angelo definitely values the partnership that we have with CDS, and I think you've set us up for a lot of success.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you. I love San Angelo. I love coming here. I love being here. So I understand why it's a place that so many people want to live and raise their families and have their business.
Good. Okay, well, that's all we have for today. I appreciate everybody joining us, and get ready for next time. We're going to be digging a little bit deeper into the Site Selectors Playbook and may touch a little bit into what we talked about today and how that all applies. But if today's episode gave you something to think about, make sure that you subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Moves That Matter podcast drops every single Monday.